So let's look at some of our 3-act structure here stuff. See, now I'm seeing like a lot of different versions here because some of these like they rise straight up. Some of these have like little rises and fall moments. Let's see. This looks pretty in depth here. The confrontation, the resolution. So you mentioned the protagonist's proficiency in a certain sport, inciting incident, introduce the MacGuffin, an object or device which moves the plot along and motivates the characters. Okay. And the protagonist marries a sweetheart. Maybe this is for a particular story, because it even says like mention a sport, like whatever. All right, so like let's apply what we've got so far to this, right? Like and see if it fits. So casually mention the protagonist's proficiency in a certain sport. I'm going to take that as build up the knowledge of the protagonist, right? Like let the player or the reader know who they are and what they do. I think that is done in our intro, right? So the protagonist is like, so like let's approach this from the viewpoint of somebody who's never played Neverspring or anything, right? So there's some sort of like evil wizard or something. It seems like he's a bad guy and he was defeated, but then he sacrifices himself to close this portal and he winds up in here. So I know he's obviously a proficient magic user because he was like an evil wizard kind of thing. So, you know, proficient in a sport, well, his sport would be magic, right? Like, so yeah, so that I think that would fit there, right? Inciting incident, that's also in there. He gets sucked into the portal. Introduce the MacGuffin. So plot point 1, everything changes and upsets the world of the protagonist. So when it says that, right, when it says everything changes, it's obviously referring to everything that's happening here in Act 1, right? So we can't reach all the way back into Neverspring to fill this. So everything changes and upsets the world of the protagonist. So this would have to be when he first finds whatever it is he goes off looking for. So it would be like the end of the next level. So this would be like your tutorial level. This would be like your, you know, the level that lets you play with, you know, when you learn about your suit, and the level that lets you play around with, like, you know, doing stuff, but then you meet the other person and they tell you what you need to do and you go to the thing. Then this could be when you get there, there's something's revealed and it's like, and basically, like, maybe this is when Svedanta realizes that Gafgarin's in her realm or something like that. Something happens and things don't go the way he thinks they're going to go. When you get to where you need to be, something is not as it seems, and it causes a ripple effect. So then maybe the person shows up just as things go wrong. So now I got some gears turning here. So we don't necessarily have to go with this, but this is just kind of like where my mind is going. So maybe we add sort of a trickster element to the stranger character, and we still don't know whether or not this is going to be the love interest, right? We'll see if like what we get in our brainstorming here, and if it feels right, we'll see how things fit and what we can do, right? That's kind of a simplified thing of what's actually going through my mind, right? But you know, they're like, who are you? They're like, someone who wants to see you fail, and then they dip out. So now Gafgarin's left in a state where he's just kind of angry, confused, and he's low on resources because he went and basically offed this guy at the behest of this stranger, and he's kind of kicking himself for like trusting the person. The immediate concern becomes that he needs to get mana, and so it says the world of the protagonist. So what's the next thing? His knowledge grows and his reactions become more informed. So he becomes more aware. All right, so yeah, so he would know now that the person's messing with them or whatever. A reminder of the antagonist's power. And it gives me okay, so what I'm thinking actually does kind of go in with that. So then what I was thinking is, so what we know of Gafgarin is if he's low on mana and he doesn't know what to do, he would grow impatient, I think. And in his impatience, and like like, he's not immune to desperation. You know what I mean? Like, he's just he's got a strong will, but there's still these other things in play, right? So if it were me in his shoes, like, and if I had like that personality, I imagine it being like, you know, he's low on mana or whatever. He decides, like, you know, he's going to gather up some mana, right? Because now the player knows how to use the mechanic to get more mana. So he needs to do something or like make a big enough bang to draw Svedanta's attention. It's now or nothing. Like, I can't mess around in here. Let's say that, like, maybe the player goes around and, like, gathers up some mana. All right. And we're not necessarily married to this. It's just kind of giving us a pacing of, like, kind of trying to figure out what we're doing here. All right. So Garen's left angry and confused, low on mana. He gathers mana out. Maybe calls out Svedanta. Like, it's kind of it's a now or never kind of thing. And so... Or something happens where Svedanta finds out he's there. Somehow, like, she herself comes into the picture. So, let me go 21, reminder of the antagonist's power, and then realizations grows again, right? So what might be a really good way to do that, if we were going to go with the 3-act structure. So we'd say, like, Svedanta appears and laughs at him. And then, says she has special plans for him, but he isn't worthy yet. And then here we can drop off our first sorrow. And then this will be where we reveal any final game mechanics too, right? So technically this is your first, like, boss fight. This would be where we, like, if there's any extra mechanic or a thing you can do or something that's granted to you by accomplishing something, like the last of it needs to be given here. Even if there's more upgrades and stuff throughout the game, but like the last bit of, like, hey, by the way, this happens. You know what I mean? Like, the last tutorial should be here. So you got first boss fight with sorrow and final game mechanic either during the fight or after winning. Okay, and so, because here's the idea. Here's what I'm thinking, right? I'm thinking, like, Svedanta she knows he's there. Like, she's known he was there since he got pulled into the portal. Like, you know, it's her realm. Like, of course she knows he's there. But she's got, and like, you know, and the player knows, especially if they played Neverspring, that, like, she wants him to, you know, join her and, like, you know, serve her willingly and, like, you know, be like one of her dark mages or whatever. And that Garen doesn't want to do that. And so she kind of tells him, you know, she's like, the idea is that she's going to make the player defeat each of the sorrows because Garen is supposed to be the last and strongest of them all. So she, you know, basically what she's going to do is get Garen to be, like, you know, the strongest. And so he, like, in her mind, like, Svedanta's motivation is to apply both pressure and a test of worthiness onto the player. So maybe, like, she does something to disable him before she drops off the boss, but then Garen, like, Yu Yu Hakusho, power of friendship, like, busts out of it anime style, you know? He's all like, ah, you know? You can do that every once in a while, I feel like. You know, just brute will your way out of something. We'll try to make that be the only time we do something like that. So now, by this time, right, so we did all that, we got to the point 1, the thing that upsets the world and sets off the protagonist, right? That dude leads him down the wrong path, so he has to call out Svedanta, kind of thing. Realization, the protagonist's knowledge grows and becomes more informed. That's him realizing he can't trust everybody and having to find another way to do his thing. Pinch point 1. All right, so Svedanta shows up, beats you up, leaves you to die. But the boss she drops off, you brute will your way out, anime style, and you defeat the boss. Realization grows and reactions become more informed again, right? You get that last game mechanic, whatever, like the boss drops or whatever you had to do to beat the boss, right? So moment of truth, protagonizes the nature of the central conflict and of the MacGuffin. So here maybe we have the stranger show back up. I'm imagining after the boss fight finishes, right? You get your last thing, you learn your mechanic or whatever. The stranger returns for a third time, but this time not as cocky and sort of like, ha, like, you know, like kind of dropping the trickster energy a little bit. And, you know, so they're like, oh, wow, like you actually defeated the boss. So you really are, like, intent on defeating her, like, you know, Svedanta, you know, why? Like, why are you doing that? So then maybe there's, like, this is a good chance maybe to get a little lore dump in. Maybe Garen talks to the stranger, is like, you know, oh, you know, like, this is what happened to me back then, and I don't want to be anybody's slave, and I'm going to be, you know, I won't be a pawn for anybody. Garen lore dump motivation, he's talking about all the stuff, all the reasons he's doing what he's doing. So now what I'm thinking is, if we're going to go with the idea of them being one of the friends, the stranger, right? This is the moment that we have to like reveal it. So if we're going to go down that route, right, and reveal this one to be like the friend, right? This actually would be a good way to do it if it was like the love interest or whatever. One of two ways I'm thinking. Either he mentions the friends and losing them, or he doesn't mention the friends and losing them, right? And if he mentions the friends, then I imagine that this character would be touched by the fact that he remembers. Because this is the one that, like, loves him. And so, because I like, in the character, I sense that there's a bitterness there between them and Gafgaren. Like, they're bitter towards Gafgaren. But the bitterness, I think, is born out of not knowing. Like, that, like, something happened to this character where they didn't just fade away, you know, like they were fading away from, you know, using the dark magic and like succumbing to the curse. But when they went out, like that, like they were just suddenly taken away, like kind of thing, you know? And so their bitterness is more of like a not knowing, right? And this is a test on Gafgaren to see whether or not he deserves that bitterness. And so either he says, oh, you know, maybe you could even do this as, but do I want to deal with a forking storyline? I don't know. I was thinking you could even make this like a choice-based thing. But if he mentions them, then they would, you know, be like, so you do remember, you know, and then like reveal themselves, right? But if he doesn't mention them, I imagine that would be a bit of like a, you know, kind of like a spit in the eye a little bit. The way that I kind of get a reaction out of the character in my mind is sort of like an outburst of like familiar anger, if that makes sense. Like sort of like a, you know, you haven't changed one bit kind of thing. Like, you know, like they sort of like, you know Gafgaren or have known him. So the thing is though, is that whichever way it goes is going to set the tone for like a lot of what goes on afterwards. Because if they're mad, then, you know, what are they going to do? If they're not mad, then what are they going to do? And so now we have to kind of ask ourselves the question, who was Gafgaren to these people when they were still alive? Right? Like, what was it that he was doing that was important enough to them to go all dark mage on his behalf, right? I have an idea emerging of sort of like this concept of like forgotten promises. Maybe Gafgaren made a promise that he would find a way to save them from the curse or something. Like maybe it was very similar to what happened with Milena, right? That like the only reason they even have the curse and got into dark magic in general to begin with was something that they did to like save him or help him with something or do something that he appreciated so much that he was like, stick with me and I'll look out for you, you know? And so like I said, going back to that idea of like trying to like use stuff that's already there in your box without having to add like new stuff. We know that Gafgaren already thinks that he can remove the curse from himself by defeating Svedanta. So can we use that to connect these characters as well? I'm just thinking like of what like the dialogue in Neverspring just kind of in my head real quick. Because in Neverspring, Gafgaren's obviously been preparing to do this for a long time. And at the end of the game, though it doesn't really say it, I hope it communicates it because it doesn't just outright say it, but he's about to be in trouble with the Emperor, you know, like the jig is up. Like everyone knows now that, you know, Merrick's father didn't betray the Emperor. They know that Lugai was the real bad guy, and Lugai and Gafgaren have been working together and all this stuff. And so it was a pinch point for Gafgaren, like, it was now or never kind of thing, right? Like, because that's in his personality to be like that. Like, whenever you're not sure, strike. That's like who he is. And so, similar to how he calls out Svedanta, right, at that first pinch point with the stuff that we were looking at with, when he got to that pinch point where he knew he only had so much time before word got back and, like, the Empire turned on him, you know, he uses his resources to command an airship to get out there and try to defeat Svedanta right then and there. But his actual plans were different, and he does mention that, right? He's like the plan, like if I had gotten just the one feather, I could have done this over time, but with the whole Phoenix itself right here, right now, well, I can't resist. And so he saw an opportunity and he tried to seize it. And so we'll say motivation point. Okay, I'm sensing a good conflict or a good tension in the future of what we've got going on so far. Give me just a second. Let me think here. Motivation point. Gafgaren is supposed to remove the curse. And then in parentheses here, I'm going to put, but he didn't, I'm going to say he didn't really get into it or didn't really try, Okay. So the idea that's kind of like stewing here is that Gafgaren made a promise to these friends at one point that he was going to find a way to like lift their curse, right? And he just didn't get around to it in time. Like they perished before he could ever find one. But he doesn't really and here's the conflict that I'm sensing ahead. The secret that he has is that technically he didn't really start trying, like really trying. Like he didn't get the suit made. He didn't go after the Phoenix down. He didn't like partner up with the guy to like get to further his plans. He didn't do any of that until his heart got broken with the whole Milena thing, right? Then suddenly it was kind of like, I need to remove this curse. I gotta get the curse. But this person doesn't know that. And so that could be a source of conflict later. So now we're getting to that abyss, that abyss problem we were having, right? Like, because we were saying, like, we were like, oh, what are we going to do for this, right? So motivation point, Gafgaren was supposed to do that thing. All right, so when the stranger reveals themselves, they could say, they were bitter at him because they didn't know, but they assume that he's so consumed with the idea of defeating Svedanta still because of this promise that he made, right? They don't know yet that really the only reason he's doing it is because it's his way of kind of throwing a tantrum about the whole Milena thing. And so, at this point, the stranger gets decides to help, and be, helpful. And they're like, oh, well, wow, you really haven't changed, even like the good parts of you haven't changed. That's, I can't believe you remembered this and blah, blah, blah. And then, so actually, okay, so this is going well. All right, now I'm thinking, so if we go with the idea of the stranger being that friend, then we still have one friend out there in the works, right? And this one's more, because of this rivalry idea, they're probably not willing to be as forgiving and understanding and all that kind of stuff as, the lover character. So somewhere out there, this person's still there, right? And so maybe the stranger's like, hey, why don't we do this together? Like, why don't we finish what we started? We'll defeat it together. And so maybe Gafgaren's like, well, hell yeah, man, I'll take some help, And so then they're like, hey, remember so-and-so? They're here too. And then, then your next level, your next stage could be, going to this other guy's place or wherever he's at, And then, so then you get there, and because of the nature of these games, right, there's a boss fight at the end of every level. So we're going to need a boss fight there. I'm thinking about going two ways with it. One, you could do the friend could be the boss fight, or a boss fight could interrupt whatever kind of reunion's going on when you find the friend. So we've got this rival character now. And this one, whether we go through jealousy, greed, or pride, or whatever, so whatever their motivation is, we've got just enough to work with here that I think what we can do safely is say that when Gafgaren shows up, they want to challenge Gafgaren. Like, it's not like a warm welcome. It's more like, let's see if you still got it kind of thing. Like, and like maybe he brags about knowing all this dark magic and how in the nightmare, once you fully succumb to the curse, maybe you can use dark magic freely in the nightmare, but Gafgaren hasn't, so he still has to use his suit. Otherwise, he's like stuck there forever kind of thing. And so maybe he's like, let's see what you got, mighty Gafgaren, we always know which of us was always better, kind of thing. And so, and you know what I'd like to do here, because this is, oh man, yeah, I think that would be good. All right, so what I'm thinking is, I had shared a scene with everybody on one of my videos. It was the Dignity of Evil one, about like making villains. And in the scene, there was this, I didn't really talk about the scene itself. It was just kind of like a background thing to show like Samurai 7 stuff. But it was from that anime Samurai 7. And I watched it in English and I watched it in Japanese with subtitles. And in that particular scene where the two samurai are sword fighting, there's the one with the two swords and the one with the older one, and they're fighting. They say different things that have different connotations. And so it was really interesting to watch, but they're both masters at swordplay. And so as they're fighting, they like, there's a point where the old samurai says to the younger samurai with the two swords, in the English one, he says like, "I think I'm in love." But in the subtitle, and like, the guy kind of looks at him like, like, are you coming on to me? Like, kind of thing. And it like distracts him, and he like kind of like goes and does a thing or whatever. But then he immediately sheaths his sword, and he's like, I'm going to turn my back to you. I think that you're too good of a swordsman, that you won't strike me down, but I have to do this thing. Like, I can't fight you right now. You'll probably win because you're that good. And then in the Japanese version, the subtitles, he says, "I am enamored," which is a very different connotation, right? And when he said in the English version, when he says "I am in love," he's either saying something purposefully to get the guy off guard, or he's being like kind of tongue in cheek, right? There's not so much of a seriousness to it. Like, you don't really believe what he's saying. But when he says "I'm enamored," suddenly I realized what the character was talking about was that he had finally found a master swordsman, right? Like, he's enamored with the guy. And I think back to that movie, The Princess Bride, when Inigo Montoya is fighting the Dread Pirate Roberts, the Wesley. And after he loses, he's like, "Kill me quickly," like, and the guy says, I'd rather destroy a stained glass window than an artist such as yourself. But since I can't have you following me," and then he knocks him out instead of killing him. And he doesn't kill him. And I think there's that spirit between skilled fighters that appreciate the, like, oh, you know what? It goes back to that whole Thanatos and Eros thing we were talking about, right? And realizing and seeing beauty in a thing and not confusing it with Eros, right? That thing that you want inside, that you realize, like, you think something is beautiful because you want more of it in your life, right? Or you need more of it in your life. Like, so in both of these aspects, these skilled fighters come across one another who are so rarely skilled that they're beautiful to the other fighter, and that the thought of killing them is beyond them. They, like, I would sooner shatter a stained glass window than destroy a stained glass window than an artist such as yourself, right? Like, so it's that recognition of the beauty in their skill. That idea feels very poignant to me, right? Like, the idea that you would spare an adversary out of respect for their skill. And so both of those scenes are kind of coming to mind in this idea that Gafgarin meets up with this old friend who was loyal to the end, but always had this rivalry. And now, in a world where nothing matters, right? Because according to this guy, we're already in the nightmare. You're not going to defeat Svedanta. So let's find out which of us was really better all along. And we're in this kind of moment now, where when you get to this other friend, they're like, nothing matters. I don't think this, like, you're not going to do it. Like, let's answer this question. Like, I've been here in this place of waiting in darkness, and this has been burning on my mind. Like, I might not get another chance to do that. I might not get another chance to do this kind of thing. And so here I'm thinking that you have a fight with the other friend, right? So other friend wants to challenge Gafgarin for rivalry. And what I'm thinking is, during the fight, whether you make the player need to pull off something, like maybe it's a difficult fight, right? Like maybe you put the onus on the player and say, like, you've got to, like, hit this thing at just the right time or do this stuff, kind of thing. and then like maybe use a pattern even so that the player gets comfortable in doing this pattern, and then as the fight ends, have the enemy character break the pattern abruptly, right? So that it catches the player off guard, like they can't get out of the way, like kind of thing. And like so what happens is basically the rival or the friend wins the fight. Or is about to win. Like in some way it should be obvious that the friend has a chance at least to win and end the fight and defeat Gafgaren. And then at that moment we should interrupt it, I'm thinking. Right? We interrupt it then, and that's when your boss fight shows up. Right? So this would be another sorrow. So during the fight, the friend wins or is about to win when suddenly the next boss sorrow. Okay, so during the fight, the friend wins or is about to win until the next boss sorrow appears. Okay, so now depending on what happens, this boss sorrow shows up. Maybe it tries to tempt the friend into finishing off Gafgaren or something like that. But at this point, this is what it goes back into, right? Like, because the rivalry, there's that rivalry, right? Like that, like, and he's been in that place waiting, and Gafgaren had promised to cure them and all this stuff, right? And he was supposed to win and finish him off. But we go back to that idea that I would sooner destroy a stained glass window than an artist, right? And so or like that, I'm enamored, like that moment where you just respect the other person's skills. Like, you might have won, but god dang, was it a good fight? You know what I mean? Like, and you don't want, like, you hope that there'll be more of that out there or something. I can't even really explain what the feeling is, but you want that thing to carry on, right? You don't want to take it away from the world. Like, you want it to be out there, like challenging you. Like, letting you know that, like, you're not the only one that takes that thing seriously or does whatever they do, right? And so for like this similar reason, whatever the temptation is, or whatever the sorrow boss says or does, trying to get the friend to finish off Gafgaren, the friend doesn't do it, right? The friend doesn't want to do it. And so to make... It's kind of funny how this works, right? When you're writing a story, it's like, to make this poignant, now we got to kill this guy. It's like, now he needs to die. So, so this other friend here, right, is going to. I guess it's a good thing we didn't develop this guy too much, but it feels appropriate. Like, something's got to happen now. You don't get to be that much of a bro and not suffer because of it. All right, you don't just get to be a cool guy and not get anything bad happen in return, right? That's how the world works. And so this guy's got to pay the price for his loyalty and his respect, right? So boss bar, in some way, shape, or form, the boss sorrow winds up killing the friend. Maybe the stranger is there, right? Like the other friend. Maybe they try to help, but it just doesn't go right. But for whatever reason, the friend dies, and so you defeat the boss, and now you're left with Gafgaren and the friend, and they've got to, I don't know if they have like a funeral or they're just talking about it or whatever. But you get another like little story moment, like little lore dump or whatever, where they're talking about, she's like, oh, like, that guy was our friend and he's gone. Like, it's my fault. I brought you here, like, kind of thing, whatever. She's like processing, the emotions of what happened. And Gafgaren, says something or whatever. And so maybe this would be a good time to reveal that the character had these romantic notions towards Gafgaren, right? Maybe now at this vulnerable point would be a good time for them to be like, like, this was going on this whole time between us, like, like, because like there's a thing that happens when somebody's gone. Like, I know it's kind of a repeat of the whole Vanessa thing with like the wine bottle, but it's like sometimes when you see someone and then they're just not there anymore, or like you're remembering someone, like it like kind of like sombers you, like, or sobers you up, and like makes you like think of like things like these, right? Like, so maybe this would be a good moment for her to be like, let him know what the reality of the situation was, and kind of try to get like some feedback from him, and then his reaction to that info can propel our story, and like a little gas jet on a spaceship, just kind of propel it one way or another. Let's see, during funeral.